What you manifest in your mind, you can bring to reality.
The Twilight Zone on CBS All Access, a show produced by Jordan Peele from, of course, Us and Get Out, and the Jordan Peele Show. I never watched their show, but you know, I've seen clips. The movies, he's a great director, and let me start. I enjoyed Twilight Zone. I love the classics. I mean, I've gone periodically. I will go back and revisit the original Twilight Zone, which I think is on Netflix. I don't know. It's on one of those streaming networks, the OG black and white Twilight Zones. I mean, obviously, Black Mirror is a more modern take on Twilight Zone, geared more specifically to technology. But where this one, there's a few episodes. I've only watched 6 episodes. Only 6 episodes are out. Well, I think there's a 7th, but I haven't watched it yet. But I watched through the space one, 6 Degrees of Freedom. Each one, some of them have more technology influence than others. But I would say it's definitely more truer to the original Twilight Zone, and versus I still like Black Mirror more than this new Twilight Zone, but this new Twilight Zone I really enjoy. The only episode I wasn't a huge fan of was A Traveler, episode 4. It's kind of a Christmas episode. It just was just not as interesting as the other ones. Like the first one is The Comedian with Kumail Nanjiani playing a stand-up comedian, and he discovers that the more he gives of himself, more honesty he gives of himself, those are the moments when the crowd laughs, which, you know, as somebody who's a huge fan of stand-up comedy, stand-up comedians, and their podcast, they talk a lot about the art form. So as not being somebody that's participated, but just as an observer, as a nerd of comedy, this one seemed very true to what it is. And Jordan Peele, I believe, did stand-up originally, if not just improv, but I think he did actual stand-up. And then Kumail Nanjiani's an actual stand-up. So I can imagine that being a pretty honest depiction of not only stand-up, but kind of the philosophy, especially now, of stand-up comedians, where it's really more about honest stories about the comedian, let the audience know who the comedian is. There's still comedians out there that are doing more obscure shit, like Duncan Trussell doesn't necessarily do a lot of things about him specifically, where he has more of an absurd style, more like surreal style to his comedy. But that is kind of in general the idea or the direction a lot of comedians are going, is giving yourself to the comedy. But in Kumail's character giving himself, those things no longer exist. So it's kind of there's a scarcity of how much he can use it, because every time he uses it, it is then gone. Which for a comedian, you would think they would need to have that last more than just one show. But the premise of it is very interesting and very fun. It kind of reminded me of the Netflix show Russian Doll in a way, because in that universe, people start disappearing, and it's almost like cycling out of different universes minus one person until it loops back around. Anyway, I don't know if that even makes sense if you haven't watched either of those shows. But next, the next episode was Nightmare at 30,000 Feet. This one, the tie-in technology-wise, is a podcast. This guy who's like paranoid about shit and scared about shit gets on an airplane going on a flight, and he finds a old school MP3 player. Looked a lot like the MP3 player I had before I got into Apple products. But just an old school, had a podcast on it, and the podcast was describing what was happening to him in the plane. And while he's listening to this, he thinks he's going to be able to save and change the outcomes of the future because this device, this podcast, is recalling the events before they happen. So he, in an attempt to get ahead of it, he ends up causing some problems. Which where it ends is very interesting. Very interesting end to it. I really enjoyed that one as well. So far, two for two. Then 3 comes in called Replay. This one, the technology tie-in little thing, is an old VHS camcorder, maybe a high 8 camcorder. And when you record and then you hit rewind, you're able to go back to a previous, I believe the rule is previous version of the you go back in time to when that moment was recorded, but it has to be recording in order for you to go back to that time. So I would only be able to travel back to every Sunday when I record all the podcasts if that rule applied to reality. But it's interesting because it uses that device of rewinding time to deal with basically cops killing black kids. It's a mom trying to take her kid to school, and they keep having an issue with this same police officer. And it's a very interesting. I enjoyed it. I enjoy not only these episodes having a really interesting twist, but they also come with a very poignant and timely kind of message and story about what the fuck is going on. So it's communicating on different levels, and I enjoyed the fuck out of it. But then episode 4, The Traveler, was not super into it. It's like this small town in Alaska that the chief like pardons somebody as a tradition every year on Christmas or during their Christmas party. It just, I don't know. It was kind of interesting, but it felt weak. It felt weak. Felt like maybe it was trying to do too much, because it also had like kind of like how we're scared of, like, you know, we fear Russia and like a new world war, and there's a lot of fear, at least some people have a lot of fear of illegal aliens, and it's just like we're living in a time where people their ignorance is causing a lot of fear and a lot of it. So I don't know, it's a weird episode. Episode 5 is very politically heavy, the wonder kind, where it's somebody that's their job is to promote a politician to get elected, and he's working for he was working for a president and fucked up, and then his career kind of went to shit, and then he found a kid that was running for school president, I believe, or just had a video of like what he would do if he was president, and it went viral. So then he decides, I'm going to make this kid president, and it takes that premise to its full extent. Which kind of reminded me of the episode of Black Mirror from the first season. It might be the first episode. Or no, not the first episode. First season, where an animated character becomes president. Kind of like that, but, you know, again, related to how ridiculous. I mean, we basically have a child as president right now. So, you know, very timely, but it was good. Not as good. It's not as weak as 4, but still weaker than the first 3 episodes. And then episode 6... super interesting. It's like it takes place in space. There's people on a mission to Mars, but down on Earth, there's nuclear war about to happen or going to happen, something like that. But the twist at the end is super interesting. Super interesting. So I'm a big fan of Twilight Zone. I'm going to finish the season for sure. Hopefully, it will have a life outside of CBS All Access on like maybe Netflix or something like that. But CBS, I don't think historically works well with others. So hopefully everybody gets a chance to see it. I recommend it. New episodes of my show come out daily. Subscribe on IGTV and everywhere else podcasts are found. Binge the full week in advance over at patreon.com/inspireddisorder. Inspireddisorder.com for all of my original artwork. Go buy some paintings now. At Ray Taylor for me on all social media. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Peace out!